Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I haven't filmed a video in quite a while. I know that in my November reset I set the goal for filming one video a week, and that has not happened, partially because I was just really overwhelmed with schoolwork and I just didn't feel like I had the time. I was also feeling really anxious and I didn't want to film. It just felt like another thing on my to-do list that was stressing me out. And then even though during the winter break I had a lot of ideas for things I wanted to film, I ended up getting sick, so I didn't really do any type of filming for YouTube. But I'm back now with a video on how to track your moods for bipolar disorder. So I wanted to talk a bit about how I track my moods for bipolar disorder and how my tracking has sort of evolved over time depending on like the severity of my symptoms and the variety of my symptoms and just how I've been doing overall. So for me, the most important thing about tracking is to make sure that you're doing the bare minimum to get the data that you need. I try to make sure that whatever I'm tracking is the least amount of friction possible. It's super easy. It doesn't add more stress or work to my day. It's something that I can do very quickly and that I can get the most amount of data from doing the least amount of work. So that is the most important tip I have for when you're tracking, is figure out what you actually need to track, what data would actually be useful in your life, and then only track the bare minimum. Another reason why tracking is important is because it really gives you an overview of what you've been feeling on a day-to-day basis, a weekly basis, even a monthly and yearly basis. And this can really help for yourself to know what your moods are like, why you might feel a certain way during a certain time of day, or why a certain time of month you're having this kind of mood swing. It's really useful to be able to see those patterns, and not only for yourself, but also to then take that to your healthcare team and show them, like, this is how I've been feeling, these are how many days I've been feeling this way. And just having that data is really helpful for your own personal insights, and also when you're working with a team to help put together your treatment plan. So the way that I've tracked has varied quite a bit since when I first started experiencing bipolar symptoms up until now. So I'm going to go through all the various different methods of tracking that I've used and that I've found to have been very helpful. So I hope that this will be useful just to see the evolution of my tracking and to give you ideas of how you can set up your own kind of spreadsheets, or if you choose to do it in a book or online, just creating your own way of tracking your moods that is going to be helpful and insightful for you. So the first type of tracker that I used was a monthly mood tracker, and this I just found online when looking for trackers for bipolar disorder. So I used this tracker pretty much at the beginning of when I got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was experiencing very high manic periods and very low depressive periods, and my mood really just felt all over the place. I had no idea what was going on. And so I started tracking it just to make sense of what I was experiencing, and to also take it to my doctors to show them like whether the medications were helping or not and where I was really struggling. So what you can see is that you have a scale for your moods. You can have normal, and then you have elevated and depressed moods. It also tracks how many hours you sleep, which is very important, especially if you're going through a manic or depressive episode. Your sleep will change a lot, and that's a very big indicator of how you're doing. I also tracked my anxiety, my irritability, the medications that I was on. I tracked meditation for myself, exercise, whether I was eating, my periods, and whether there were any stressful or emotional events in my life. And even though this was a lot, I felt like it was really important for me to get as much detail as I could at this stage, just because I was experiencing such crazy mood swings, and I really wanted to capture everything that I was going through and track all the symptoms that I was experiencing. I don't use this anymore because my mood is a lot more stable and I don't need to track all these things anymore. But when starting out, if you're going through a lot, I think getting as much information as possible is really important. So at the same time I was tracking my moods on a monthly basis, I was also filling in this weekly worksheet for bipolar disorder. So I found this worksheet on Etsy. I think it was like $3 to purchase, And I printed out a bunch of these, and then I basically just used it every single week. And this was really helpful when I was experiencing very severe symptoms. I felt like I was going through so many different mood states that I needed to have both the monthly tracker and the weekly tracker just to keep on top of things. So as you can see, I tracked my sleep. I also tracked my mood every day. And then this habit tracker was extremely helpful because while I was going through such a severe bipolar episode, things like showering and brushing my teeth were very hard to do. So having them in a tracker really just made it easier for me to like check those things off and make sure that I was doing them. And then we also have meditation, exercise, healthy eating, and vitamins. There's also a spot for your medication, for writing down what you're thankful for, how much water you had. And then I always enjoy having like a brain dump or a note section where I can write down every day what I'm experiencing. So this was really helpful. I think the most helpful part was this habit tracker and then the sleep tracker. This was also useful, but because I was tracking my moods on the monthly basis as well, I felt like that the chart that I showed before with the graph was a bit more useful. So once I started to feel better as I progressed with my treatment and my mania went away and my psychosis went away, I didn't feel the need to use that monthly and weekly tracker that I showed before because I wasn't really tracking any type of manic or hypomanic states. I was feeling very depressed, but I felt very stable in that depression. So I didn't feel the need to continue tracking the way I was because, like I said, it's really important to keep it as simple as you can, to track the least amount of variables that will give you the most amount of data, because otherwise it just becomes tedious and you're not going to do it. And the only way that this is helpful is if you do it consistently and you're able to see those patterns emerge. So I ended up switching from the binder that I had with those printed out trackers in it to a Notion template. And that was because I started school and I didn't have time to track my moods as extensively on paper every single day. So now I'm going to show you the Notion template that I made to track my moods as I moved from a period of mania into a period of depression. So to continue to track my moods, I ended up using Notion because I felt like writing on paper had developed too much friction and I couldn't do it sustainably anymore. And because I was in school, I was always on my laptop, so it was very easy at the end of the day for me to just quickly go onto my Notion page and track my mood. So after I had been tracking my mood in my binder on paper for quite a few months, I felt that my treatment had evolved to the point where I was no longer experiencing mania or psychosis, but I was experiencing a lot of depression. And for me, I would have a very dramatic variation in my moods throughout the day. So tracking my mood once a day wasn't very helpful because in the morning I would feel really good and in the evening I would feel really depressed again, or sometimes it was the other way around where in the morning it was very dark and gloomy out in the winter months and I felt really bad and very lethargic, but then by the evening I felt a lot more light and happy. So for me, tracking my mood once a day wasn't going to give me the data that I needed to have insight into how my mood was fluctuating. So I ended up creating this simple tracker on Notion to track my moods twice a day. So I had the date and then I ranked my mood on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is the best, in the morning, right after I woke up, and then in the evening, right before I went to bed. And this was very easy for me to do because I was at school and I was on my laptop all the time. So in the morning, as soon as I opened my laptop, I just typed in a number, and then at night, right before I closed down for the night, I would type in a number for my evening mood. I also made a spot for me to check off when I was using my light therapy box, because this was in the September to December winter month period when I do experience some seasonal affective disorder. So I wanted to make sure I was tracking my moods in the morning so I know when I'm feeling that way, and also giving myself a checkbox for using my light box. And then I also kept a short category for me to write down just a couple of sentences about how I'm feeling. And I think having that short journal portion is very important, just to give you insight into your day, why you might have been feeling bad. For me, like I was feeling bad and then I deleted TikTok because I felt like TikTok was making me feel bad. And then just having, a little bit of information about what was going on that day. So I tracked my moods morning and night, and that was very helpful for me because I wanted to see what times of day I was experiencing these symptoms and what could be the underlying cause, which I wrote in my journal entries. I also ended up doing these daily reflections that I made for myself on a template in Notion as well, and this was just to help me ground my day and just to give me a chance to work on my mental health as I was tracking my moods. So I created this template and I put this quote in that I really love, that there was never a night or a problem that could defeat sunrise or hope. And then in the morning, when I tracked my morning mood, I would come here and I would write down some things that I was grateful for. So 3 things that I had gratitude for. And then I also wrote down an affirmation. And that was really good, a way for me to start my morning. I love gratitude. I love affirmations. Like, I love doing that. So doing this in the morning, especially while I was in school and I was really busy and I didn't really have time to like sit down and meditate for 10 minutes, just typing something up really quickly had a way of centering my day. And then in the evening, this was really helpful because I would experience very low moods in the evening. So writing down my small wins are really helpful for me. And then a positive thought to go to sleep with is also very helpful for me. So the other thing that I did during this period of time was using this free Google Sheets habit tracker. And what it allows you to do is to create 6 habits that you will follow for the whole year. I didn't do this for the whole year. I did it after I had finished tracking on paper and I was moving to digital tracking. And what this was really helpful for me for was to maintain those healthy habits that I needed to do, that if I wasn't keeping track of, I wouldn't do by myself. So just like on the weekly sheet that I showed before, where I was tracking my showers and brushing my teeth and taking my medication, once I had gotten better where I was doing those things habitually, I didn't need to track them anymore. I moved on to this tracking sheet. And on this tracking sheet, I tracked these 6 habits, which were waking up at 8 a.m., meditating, exercising for 30 minutes, journaling, going for a walk, and doing my skincare routine. So I ended up tracking those because I felt like those were the bare minimum activities that I needed to do to have a good day and to take care of my mental health. These were the 6 self-care activities that made me functional while I was very depressed. So getting up at the same time every day was huge for me. Exercising, I didn't do it every day. I did it every other day or 3 times a week. And going for a walk, I also didn't do every day, but I set a goal for going, maybe like 12 times a month or 4 times a month. And so this tracker was really great in allowing me to maintain those self-care habits, especially when things were really rough. And it's really cool when you track it, you get these little emojis that come up, and depending on how many you check off in a day, you'll get a different emoji. And then at the side, it tells you how much of your goal you reached. So for the month of October, I wanted to go for a walk 13 times, and I only reached 77% of that goal. But I wanted to exercise 13 times, and I did more than that, so I got 108%. And this tracker was just really easy. It's just a checkbox, and it was really helpful for me to maintain those self-care habits that were really, really critical to my well-being. So the next tracker that I used that was really important is this PRISM Calendar, and I got this sent to me specifically from my psychiatrist. And what this is meant to do is to find any patterns between your mood and your period. So I was noticing really severe mood fluctuations right before my period. I would have very depressed thoughts, very suicidal thoughts before my period, and we wanted to track that mood and to see whether there was actually an association between that time of the month and the mood symptoms I was experiencing. So this calendar was sent to me, and I used it, I think, 4 times. So I tracked about 3 cycles with it, and I was able to determine that there was a pattern between my period and my mood fluctuations. So this PRISM calendar is very useful for specifically period-related symptoms. So those are the main ways that I have been tracking my moods. I started off with those paper trackers for my month and my weekly moods. Then I moved on to Notion to track my mood day and night and to track my habits for self-care. I also used the PRISM tracker to track my period. And now I'm at the point where I am very grateful to be very stable. I don't have manic episodes anymore. I don't really experience severe depression anymore. So I've gotten to the point where I don't feel like I need to track my moods. And I don't think that you have to continue tracking forever. I think if that's something that's helpful for you and you like to have that data, that's great. You can use your tracking methods for as long as is useful to you. But for me, now that I'm stable, tracking my mood it just seems like a waste of time. I have no motivation to do it at all. So I haven't been tracking my moods. I did try to use apps like Dailyo to track my mood just once a day, but I feel like the data that comes out of that is really useless to me. Like, I know that when the sun's out, I feel better. I know that when I socialize, I feel better. I don't need to track these things to be aware of that relationship anymore. So I've gotten to the point where I really don't track my moods at all. I might in the future, if I start to experience more anxiety or more depression, then I'm always going to track again. But right now, I don't really track my moods. The one thing that I do track, however, is my sleep. So for me, even though my moods are very stable, I know that it's hugely dependent on my sleep. So when my sleep is good, my moods are great. When my sleep is bad, it really affects every area of my life. So I don't track my moods, I do track my sleep. So I went to HomeSense recently and I bought this sleep journal and it was perfect. I just thought, like, this is a great thing to do. It was only $7.99, and basically it gives you a page to color in your sleep and to rate the quality of your sleep. There's also a spot to talk about how many times you woke up in the middle of the night and the reasons for those interruptions. They have a spot to write down the number of alcoholic and caffeinated drinks you had, the last thing you ate, the last thing you did before bed. You have a page to write down your dreams. And then there are also like fun activities like writing down 3 good things from your day, coloring, doing a maze, affirmations. So this journal that I just picked up is basically the only thing that I use right now. I just put my sleep in there and I do coloring when I feel like it. And this is basically all I need to stay stable, is having an eye on my sleep schedule and making sure that I'm getting good quality sleep. So that's really the evolution of how I've been tracking for bipolar disorder: my moods, my sleep, my period. So I hope this was useful just to get some sort of ideas of how maybe you can implement tracking in your own life and the ways that tracking can be useful. Once again, I really encourage you to make your tracking as easy as possible so that you're actually likely to do it and that you can have consistent data from tracking. I also think that if there are things you don't need to track, don't feel like you need to track it just to have 12 habits that you have on your habit tracker. For me, I don't track my habits anymore because brushing my teeth is something that I can just do naturally. Going for walks is something that I can just do whenever I feel like it. I no longer have to track my workouts because I just do them. Having those self-care habits to track, having my moods to track was really when I was struggling to do those things, and checking them off every day made me more accountable and made me more likely to get those things done. I also think it's very useful to share anything you've tracked with your healthcare team. They might be able to notice patterns that you haven't, or if you've noticed patterns and you want them to be aware of it, you can show them what you've been tracking. I've also found one unintentional benefit to tracking my moods and my habits, and that has been to give me a lot more perspective on what I've been dealing with. So I think it's easy to really get down on yourself and to be hard on yourself when you're in a bipolar episode. But when you track your moods, you can really see that you've been experiencing very severe symptoms, and it can make you behave more compassionately towards yourself once you see on paper exactly what you've been experiencing. I also think it's useful in the other sense where I find that there would be weeks when I felt like I've been depressed this whole week and just like this week was terrible. But then when I look back on my daily tracking, I've actually only been depressed like 4 days out of the week or 5 days out of the week. And that really kind of breaks down the depression a bit because it feels so all-encompassing and all-consuming and like it'll never go away. But once I saw that I was only feeling depressed for like 5 days out of the week, there was hope there that things can get better. It was really just like a little light in the tunnel. So that's, in that way, tracking your moods can really give you perspective on your symptoms, and it can be a way of treating yourself more compassionately and having more awareness about how bad things are when you need to reach out for help. Maybe you even notice that things are going really great. So I think tracking your moods, tracking your bipolar disorder is really, really helpful and really important. And if you're at the stage where you don't need to track anymore, that's great too. So I hope you enjoyed seeing all the different trackers that I used. I'll put them in the description of this video in case you wanted to check them out for yourself. I didn't actually use any apps for tracking. I did try different apps and I just never felt like I could stick to using an app. So these are the ones that worked for me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!